Hi everyone. Uh, my apologies again for the delayed posting of this material, but this lecture is combined week 12 and week 13 managing and practicing resilience. Chapters 4 and 5 from the resilience practice book. So the chapters talk about 4 kinds of interventions that are used in resilience practice. It's important to think about these different kinds of interventions because if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. But as we know, when dealing with dynamic and adaptive systems, everything is not a nail. And so you need different tools in the toolbox to try to transformation, to guide transformation, or to manage the adaptation of the system. So the different kinds of interventions that were discussed include management, so changes in recommended management practices, financial intervention, providing assistance, making investments, government subsidies or taxes, governance and institutions, so in changing the laws or regulations or changing policies that guide management, and education or information to try to influence behavior. As the readings really emphasize that sequencing of interventions is important, and that financial assistance before policies are changed could lead to negative consequences. The reading also makes a really good distinction between passive adaptive management, active adaptive management, and strategic adaptive management. Passive adaptive management is typically what, when we talk about adaptive management or think about or read about adaptive management, usually it's referring to passive adaptive management. It's managing with the thinking of adaptation or being adaptive in mind, but it's not being experimental in its approach. And so passive adaptive management does treat management as an experiment, and by that I mean there are explicit hypotheses or explicit thinking about how the system will respond to management interventions. But those management interventions are prescribed because they seem like the best management solution, not because it is an active experiment. So that's the difference. Passive adaptive management does entail adjusting the conceptual model of how a system, the conceptual model of the system in your mind based on the response of the system to the management intervention. So then again, active adaptive management refers to deliberately applying interventions to systems. This little graph I thought was effective. It shows in what situations active adaptive management may be necessary. So in situations with high social uncertainty and high scientific uncertainty, active adaptive management may be a good intervention strategy. In situations with low social uncertainty, so for example, in situations where this figure comes from forestry, so in situations where there's a high value placed on timber, the social uncertainty is low, and we know what kind of management interventions are desired based on optimizing that forest resource. Another real key theme of this entire course, but of the readings this week, include governance. Governance involves citizens' private and public organizations. That includes nonprofit organizations as well as governments, and it operates at multiple scales. So governance is really um, this mash of actors in how decisions get made. Um, 30, 40 years ago, governments made decisions regarding natural resources, ecosystems, and today it's a much more eclectic pairing and matching of governance of different actors. Governance has two key components: institutions and organizations. Institutions refer to the formal and informal rules, laws, regulations, policies, and then to the very informal side, norms. Institutions mediate interactions among people, between people, and their environments. And then organizations refers to the social networks and the social and political processes through which the rules are implemented. Adaptive governance. The four interacting aspects of adaptive governance include to build knowledge and understanding of resource and ecosystem dynamics to respond to feedback, feed that knowledge into adaptive management practices, and create the conditions for learning, supporting flexible institutions and multi-level governance systems to allow for adaptive management, and deal with external disturbance, uncertainty, and surprise. You can see the relationship between adaptive management and adaptive governance in the figure on the right. Adaptive governance, really refers to this meta perspective of management in regards to co-producing the rules from which management decisions are made, from which planning is made, management decisions are made, and then also, really important, monitoring, learning, feeding back that learning into the rules of the game. There are also a number of problematiques discussed. These refer to a set of problem sets or examples all around a similar concept. So it's a French term, but refers to this collection of concepts around a similar topic or word. And so, as the chapter outlines, resilience has a lot of different meanings. Talks about psychosocial resilience, that identified really key resilience themes of sustaining a desirable identity, flexible institutions, adapting to change, and understanding the context of the system. We hear resilience talked about a lot in disaster relief and crisis management. Examples here highlight the difficult role of government in disaster mediation, the problematic role of accountability, the importance of time, not too long, so time can be a threshold in and of itself, but also not too soon. That quick fix disaster reliefs can be failures. And also talks about the importance of sense-making capacities at the community level. So how do we make sense of disturbance? In engineering, there's a really interesting discussion on meta-robustness, which refers to the robustness of a robust design process. So typically in engineering resilience, we think of the design being robust or resilient to change. This term meta-robustness is referring to the robustness of the actual design process. So understanding and questioning the assumptions, tools, infrastructures, and institutions of the designer. Resilience and health. There's some insights here for resilience practice around self-organizing systems and allowing the system, in the case of health, the body, to probe resilience boundaries, and the tendency to protect and avoid risk can have secondary consequences. In law, law is really fascinating to me. When we think about institutions, we think about a wide range of formal to informal institutions, norms being on the very informal side, law being on the very formal side. It really highlights the tension between dynamic and adaptive systems, which social ecological systems are, and the need for law to be tight and explicit. And then economics. There are a lot of parallels in new economic thinking or contemporary economic thinking, 21st century economic thinking, and resilience. And by that I mean economic thinking today, some economic thinking, some economic theory uh, does apply the principles of complex adaptive systems. And so there are parallels between economics and resilience thinking and resilience practice. A new era of economics should focus more on realism, less on rigor, more on equity, less on efficiency, and more on humility, less on hubris. That's all for this PowerPoint set. Um, watch the videos, and there is a quiz this week. Thanks, everyone.